Hey lifters, Ashley Vargas here, and today we are going to be talking about the bench press and specifically proper setup and proper execution of the bench press. So, as a reminder, the goal of a powerlifter is to lift the most weight as efficiently and effectively as possible. And in order to do that, you need to have a proper setup that is both efficient and utilizing your strengths. So, and this is something that a lot of lifters struggle with, especially in the beginning when they're just kind of figuring things out. They don't think about the setup. All they're worried about is moving the bar. And proper bar movement and proper bar path all starts from the correct setup. And the correct setup is going to vary depending on the lifter. Everyone has different leverage points. Everyone has different, length of limbs, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration when developing your setup technique. However, there are two things that remain consistent from lifter to lifter. The first one is you want to make your range of motion as short as possible, and that is going to make your lift efficient. And then the second is you want to utilize your strengths as much as possible in each particular lift. So, for example, on a bench press, if a lifter is very tricep dominant, we're probably going to have that grip a little bit closer than I would somebody who is more pec dominant. And yes, they are sacrificing a little bit of range of motion. However, they are going to have more strength and more power in the push, being able to incorporate that tricep a little bit more. So those are some things that are going to vary from lifter to lifter. So make sure to keep that in mind. Today, we are going to be breaking down one of my clients' very first bench press videos. So with that, we're going to be looking at how she sets up her bar path specifically and what the rest of her body is doing within the bench. So, contrary to popular belief, bench press is not just an upper body chest movement. Bench press is a full body movement if you execute it properly. Everything from chest, shoulder, tricep, back, core, legs, everything. And again, going back to the concept of efficiency, being able to utilize your full body and incorporate every single muscle group in order to aid with the press is going to give you more power and more strength within that bench press versus just isolating the pec itself. So let's take a look at that video and really dive into where some of her opportunities are. And that way you can have a really good visual of what I'm talking about. As we watch this video, there's a few things that I want you to pay attention to. Take a look at the type of bench that she's using. It's just a standard bench that you can find in any commercial gym. We're going to talk about the benefits of using a regulation bench. Take a look at her hand placement and her grip, as well as the angle of her elbows as she's descending into the press. We're also going to talk about her foot placement, leg drive, and the arch in the bench press. So as we watch the video, you can see that she has a couple opportunities. But honestly, she's really not in a bad spot, especially for being a newer lifter. And she's really doing herself a service by reaching out for coaching early on, because making these corrections before she's really had a lot of time to learn bad habits is only going to benefit her in the future. So as we break down this video, the first thing that I want to talk about is the type of bench that she's lifting on. If you are interested in becoming a competitive powerlifter, I highly recommend going to a powerlifting gym, a strength-based gym, some type of gym that is going to have a regulation bench press. Compared to big box gyms that just have the standard bench presses. So a regulation bench is going to be significantly wider. It's also a little taller, and you have the ability to adjust the height. So it's perfect for the height that you need. And it also has guards on it too. So if you are training at a higher percentage and you fail a rep, you don't have to worry about, getting stuck down at the bottom because they do have the guards on them. Also, we want to create circumstances and train in circumstances that are going to match the circumstances of a powerlifting competition. So if you are not training on the type of bench that you're going to be training on in the meet, that's going to do you a disservice in the long run. But diving into her form specifically, the first thing that I want to talk about is her hand placement. So this lifter is not a tricep dominant lifter. And she also has longer arms. So for her, I made the recommendation of taking her grip a little bit wider. And that is going to allow her to shorten her range of motion. And she's not going to sacrifice too much tricep engagement. So the widest you can be as a competitive powerlifter in order to stay within the guidelines of, I'm pretty sure any federation, I would need to double check one of them, but for the majority of federations is 83 centimeters. That's the widest you can have your grip. I typically don't have lifters grip that wide unless they're at the elite level. So typically I'll have them closer to somewhere between 75 and 80 centimeters, and that tends to be most comfortable and most effective for most lifters. But again, there's a little bit of variation there, so keep that in mind. But for her, taking her grip a little bit wider is going to help her. Also, if you look at her elbow placement, it is fairly wide. It's almost in line with her shoulder, which honestly is completely deactivating the tricep pretty much altogether. So we want to have those elbows tucked in at a 45 degree. And that is going to, one, keep your shoulders safe, make it less front delt dominant, engage your tricep a little bit more, and also allow you to activate your lats in the press. So those are the two things that I wanted her to really focus on with the upper body in order to make that lift more efficient. Also addressing the open palm at the top. You cannot let go of your bar at any point throughout the lift. You will get red lighted, you will get a no lift. So you need to make sure that you have that bar fully gripped at all times. So as I said before, the bench is truly a full body movement when you execute it correctly. And there's a common misconception out there that bench is really just an upper body pec movement, and it's not. So if you were just isolating the upper body, the chest and the shoulders, for example, and not recruiting the rest of your body, there's no way that you're going to be able to push the same amount of weight until you start recruiting the strength from the lower half. And that is going to not only aid in the press, but it's also going to make you more efficient in the execution of the lift. So when we refer to like lower body engagement in powerlifting, it's referred to as leg drive. Now, with leg drive, there are some nuances to it. So one, you need to be incorporating leg drive throughout the duration of the lift from the time that you unrack the bar to the time you rack the bar. And once people kind of figure out how to incorporate leg drive, they tend to only incorporate it in the press itself and forget about it during the rest of the lift. And when you do that, there's a tendency for the butt to pop off the bench. And when that happens, it is considered a violation of the lift. And if you're in a meet setting, you're going to get red lighted for that lift. So when you are utilizing leg drive, you want to think about your feet pressing down and away, okay, which then is going to drive power up to the upper body. So that power needs to be recruited throughout the entirety of the lift from the second that bar is unracked to the second it is racked again. So in analyzing our lifters' lower body engagement, as you could see from the video, there really wasn't any. I will say one thing I was very surprised about was her foot placement. She did have her heels off of the floor and her feet pulled back a little bit, which new lifters often don't do. So she was in a really good starting place as far as her foot placement. I do want her to work on pulling her feet back a little bit more, which is going to help with the arch. And we'll get into the bench press arch here in a second. But as far as incorporating leg drive, she really didn't have any. And as you could tell, there was a ton of movement in her footing through every single rep. I'm pretty sure every single rep that she did, she moved her left foot. And that creates a lot of instability in your body as well as in the bar. So when your body shifts on a bar from side to side or up and down, your bar is going to move along with your body. So if you have a lot of movement side to side, your bar is going to be doing this. And uneven weight, unstable weight is always heavy weight. It is going to make your lift so much harder to execute, and you're most likely going to have an uneven lockout if you do that, which depending on the severity of the unevenness of the lockout, it could be grounds for a red lighted lift. So, which obviously we want to avoid those as much as possible. So again, creating instability in the body is going to create instability in the bar. Now, with her leg drive, I recommended her practice this in stages. So we don't just want to overhaul her entire lift. We want to do a couple different things in different chunks. That way we can perfect a portion of it, get that memorized, have that be second nature, and then layer onto it. So with her, the focus is going to be just more grounding the feet and creating stability. So for her, I just wanted her to start by pulling her feet back just a little bit and then pressing them down into the ground, and creating at least the tension in the lower body, which is going to help her control the bar even more. The third piece of the puzzle that we're going to talk about today is going to be the bench press arch. There's a couple different reasons why people bench with an arch, but the primary reason is to shorten the range of motion, which again is going to lead to efficiency. So the bench press arch is something that's really difficult for a lot of people, whether you are newer to lifting or more advanced. It tends to be a very difficult position for people to be in. And in the beginning, the position is very uncomfortable. When you reach the intermediate level, the position is very uncomfortable, and once you hit the elite level, guess what? It's still really uncomfortable. So you just learn to deal with that uncomfortability and learn to lift with it, because it does make such a dramatic improvement on the way that you execute your bench press. And tying everything together, it's kind of like that icing on the cake, right? So we have the hand placement that is both making our lift more efficient as well as incorporating our strengths. We have the leg drive to incorporate the lower body and send power from the legs up into the upper body. And then we are going to, through the bench press arch, bring our chest significantly closer to the bar, which again is going to create a ton of efficiency in your lift. The less distance you have to push super heavy weight, the more successful you are going to be in this sport. So with a bench press arch, there's a lot of mobility work that usually has to come before you're able to accomplish the arch. And there's such a wide variety of levels of arching, I guess we could call it. There's some people that can only get a little teeny tiny arch, and there's some people where it's like, are you Gumby? Like, good Lord. And everywhere in between. So there is a lot of mobility work that has to precede that. And typically just based on like anatomy and mobility limitations and whatnot, women tend to be able to get into this position a lot easier than men can, and have a slower learning curve with that position. So, but once you're able to accomplish that and then pair that with the other two things that we talked about with hand placement and leg drive, you are going to see such a huge improvement in your bench overall, and really start to get comfortable with that lifting style. And once you get comfortable with it and start to see the success and you practice it and train it, you're never going to be able to physically or mentally go back to either benching flat or benching with your feet flat and forward. Those things are just going to feel so awkward, because you have trained your body how to lift more effectively. As we pull everything together, what I want the biggest takeaway from this video to be is your lift is only going to be as good as your setup. The setup is the foundation for your lift, and if you are starting on a rocky, unstable foundation, the rest of your lift is just going to follow suit. So if you're a lifter and you're not sure whether or not your setup is as good as it could be, click the Join My Program link and schedule yourself a lift review. In that lift review, just like we saw in this video, I'm going to break down a lift of your choice, identifying where the limitations are, whether it's mobility limitations, weak points, areas where you're not using your leverage points as efficiently as you could be, and then also analyzing your setup as well and making adjustments. Also providing drills to how you can work on all of those identified areas and improve and feel more comfortable adding weight to your barbell over time. So if you found value in this video, please subscribe and share with your fellow lifters, and I will be seeing you all again very soon.